Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host,
Rodney Shortridge,
and co-host,
Robin Dalton.
Thank you, Holly and Tara. From deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight. Tonight we have a special co-host, one of the paranormal love goddesses, Misty Connor.
Rodney, thank you for inviting me. Now, I don't think I can fill the shoes of your beautiful co-host, Robin, but I'm going to try, honey. I'm going to try.
Well, I'm glad you tried. Glad you tried. The reason why Robin's not here, she has a little family emergency. Nothing nobody to worry about, but she'll be back next week, and we hope everybody works out good, and her thoughts are with them tonight. And tonight, our special guest is a friend of mine, Ron Whitehead. Ron is a poet, writer, editor, publisher, organizer, scholar, and a professor. I'd like to wish everyone a early happy Easter. And Misty, this is the part where I normally ask Robin what she done for the past week. So, what have you done for the past week?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Rodney. I was on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what I was going to say about this. But other than battling allergies, that is the worst this time of season. I can't even go outside without sneezing my head off. But other than that, just trying to keep my head above the water. What about you, buddy?
Oh, same thing. I think I've got allergies. All of a sudden, I've had a sinus infection for the first time. I wake up, my eyes all watery, and my nose dried up, and then the rest of the day I'm sneezing my head off. So I believe I've got to the age where I'm going to have to go get checked.
Welcome to the world of allergies, my friend.
Oh, hey, suck. Well, since we're a little pushing on time, I'd like to welcome our special guest, the outlaw poet, Ron Whitehead. Hello, Ron. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Hi, Rodney. I couldn't. I'm honored to be on your program. Thank you for the invite. I didn't catch the name of your co-host there, the young lady.
Oh, that's so nice you call me a young lady. My name's Miss Charlotte.
Hi there. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, Ron.
So, Ron, how you doing, brother?
Better than ever.
Good.
What I tell people when they ask me how I'm doing, I'm getting younger and older at the same time. Some faster than ever. Younger and older at the same time, faster than ever. And I grew up on a farm in Kentucky, and I'm sure you remember DDT, the chemical that they outlawed that we used to spray on tobacco. Well, we'd fill the tankard up, the canister up, and go down the tobacco roll, and by the time I got to the end of the first roll, I was drenched in DDT. So I think that's it's already a mutant and an alien, and that just magnified that. So when germs come around, once they take a sniff, they just go running. So I'm as healthy as I can be, 65 years young. I'm an abundance.
I'm just damn ugly. That's the reason why nothing messes with me.
I'm doing great. I work out and exercise every day. Walk, bicycle, run, do 100 push-ups, and sit-ups and curls, and spend as much time outside as possible. I've been living and being my dream for 26 years now. I quit teaching college and university, which I did for over 20 years. I quit that about 6 years ago, and I have devoted for 26 years my entire life to my creative work, and so poetry and writing has taken this country boy all over the world, and I'm blessed by that. And So I spend a lot of time traveling, and I perform my poems and stories accompanied by musicians and bands. And I love every kind of music, so I work with all kinds of, you name it, and I've worked with musicians and bands who play that kind of music. And recently did a tour of Finland and Estonia. I was a featured poet at 4 international arts festivals, and halfway through, I was on a 9-hour train ride from Lapland to southern Finland, and I realized that I didn't know too much about my mom's first 18 years. My mom will soon be 84, and my dad died 6.5 years ago. And so I had the vision in an instant to write a book of poems and stories and interviews with my mom. And I got back and I called her, and she was excited. And so I worked around the clock on that with Mama, and while I was going through her journal notes, I discovered a handwritten piece of paper. And Mama wrote to Daddy. She said, Ed, my dad's name was Edwin. Her name is Greta Whitehead. And she said, Ed, when the kids are grown and leave home, I'm going to become an author. And so at the age of 83, my mom's a published author. And so I couldn't be more proud to have had the vision and worked around the clock and got this book done, and it was just released. It's titled Mama, A Poet's Heart and a Kentucky Girl. And so I'm real pleased, excited, and happy about that. So I stay busy working. I collaborate with people all over the world working on creative projects. And one thing my parents taught me, my dad's a coal miner and a farmer. I come from a long line of farmers, coal miners, holy roller preachers, and strong women. And so my parents taught me through their actions, more than their words, to never look up to or down at anybody. We're all in this together. And so I take that way of living and being with me wherever I go, and I have friends all over the world as a result of that. So life is good. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share with you a short poem which fits into this, my reason for being on this program. My life has always been paranormal, and Kentucky Blues.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, yes.
I'm a poor, wayfaring stranger, wandering through this vale of woe. But there's no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright land to which I go. From Kentucky he came to East Chicago rail yard to work. He was gone. And at night, after 14-hour days, Gideon's Bible and the cheapest wine warmed body and soul, sacred ceremony and ramshackle bed, bug, newspaper wall, beer sign, neon hotel within eyeshot of the yard. Not far to lumber on frigid morn, early evening through the night, all night, the wind whispers, cries, wails, sings to her. And through the cracks of her attic wall, she listens. And when the wind don't blow, she turns an ear to the voice coming to her through the stillness of gnarled cedar and pine, blanketing like shrouds the old gray-weathered, wood-slatted farmhouse, nestled deep in this cold, barren wilderness. And she turns an ear to the voice coming to her through the stillness of cedar and pine. And through the stillness, she turns and looks at his gray railman's hat, hanging limp from 8-penny nail on wormwood wall. His hat and railroad manual were all he brought home the last time. But that first Christmas visit from East Chicago and his new job, he brought her a blue calico dress and red sweater with pearl buttons carried on the train with gifts for all. He and they all proud of him, a man, no longer boy, but always hard worker, a farm and mine in this pioneer Kentucky land. but now he returns again, so soon, unexpected, returns eternal presence, home for good. His body from East Chicago rail yards he comes, his body crushed between coal cars, coal. And like the bituminous gold shipped from Kentucky to foreign parts, he's delivered by train. Long, wailing whistle signals his arrival, last stop of the L&N. And a year later, frail, tired, torn, she drifts through tears. By candlelight she sees his spirit at top of attic stairs, at foot of her bed, calming, real presence. He moves closer, reaching to her. His hand touches her forehead. Her eyes close finally to deep dream sleep. I am a poor wayfaring stranger, wandering through this vale of woe. So that's a poem titled Kentucky Blues from my book titled Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon, and which is about the story of a true story, based on a true story of a young man, me, with a different name, goes by the name of the Bone Man in the book. And in 1973, I participated in the Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon, and 144 people started out in that, and I rocked for 89 hours and 55 minutes from Saturday morning to Wednesday morning, and over 30 people were hauled away to the hospital having had one kind of breakdown or another. And I won't tell you the outcome. You have to check out the book. You can Google Ron Whitehead, Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon, and check it out. But it was, I entered that. Mama called me. I left home when I was 17, and I've been traveling ever since. Lived in many places, from Arizona to Iceland. And she said, Ronnie, I think you'll be interested in this. And she told me about it, and I went down to Beaver Dam. They were having, I think it's a 150-year celebration. And the mayor came up with the idea for the event. He didn't think anybody would last over 24 hours, and he didn't realize how important the money, first prize money was for the unemployment being over 20% at the time, and people were hungry. And so I did it to expand my consciousness, and I wanted to see how far I could go, and wanted to see what sleep deprivation would do to my state of mind. And I entered altered states of consciousness during, throughout, and after, particularly after 24 hours of going with no sleep. And it just had some incredible experiences as a result of that. And one thing that came out of it was that I developed my willpower. I discovered, called on my reserves, and discovered that I could do more than I'd ever dreamed of, just as far as having the tenacity and the perseverance to go through difficult, unusual, strange situations. So, anyway, there's something of an introduction. Hello, it's good to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. That was very beautiful. I love to hear you when you do your poems and your singing and stuff. I mean, you're truly inspirational for being a country boy. Can you tell us what led you on the path of becoming a writer?
Well, I knew from the earliest age. Well, I'll tell you what. We're born in space. We measure space with time. But if that's all there was, life would be boring, like a metronome. Tick-tock, tick-tock. There's a third magical element called rhythm that provides the mojo, the spice, the flavor, the dance, the song, the poetry of life. And so I discovered as a kid, walking through the pasture, across the yard, mowing the yard, walking in the pasture, across the field, through the woods, that I walked with a rhythm. And with that rhythm, when you walk with the rhythm and let go enough, and I like to wander through the wilderness. When I was done with my chores, and I started working and doing jobs off the farm when I was 5 years old to earn my own money. I got a little bit of an allowance. It wasn't much, but anything was a lot to me. But I would wander. Mama, when Daddy was off the mines and I'd done my jobs, Mama would let me wander. And so I'd go. I'm the oldest of 6. My mom's the oldest of 13. My dad was one of 11. And I've always been independent, and I'd go wandering here, there, and everywhere. And I didn't mind getting lost because I knew the direction of the sun. And so I had my geographical coordinates down. But I walked with a rhythm, and words would come to me in songs, and I just naturally memorized songs, and I would change the lyrics of songs. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy. Get along home, Cindy girl. I wish I was an apple hanging in a tree, and every time a Cindy passed, you'd take a bite of me, and songs like that. The old-time songs. I come from a long line of singers and musicians on my mom's side, and so when I was in her womb, I was listening to that old-time, the white blues, that mountain Appalachian, going back to Ireland and Scotland and Wales and England. Those songs I grew up with, and so the musical element of life just naturally came to me, and I was talking poems when I was a boy, and so it's just been a natural thing for me. And then, but as we got Reader's Digest, now I noticed an ad in the mailman where I grew up out in the country. Well, when a mailman came, it was like Christmas. You get a letter or a magazine, a package or something. And so I went to school when I was 5 because I just wanted to go. And we didn't have kindergarten. And so I saw an ad. I started reading it. I saw an ad for book clubs in some magazine. Mom and Daddy would get a few magazines. I saw one for Grit magazine, so I started selling Grit magazine door to door in Centertown, a little town of population 323, a couple miles away from the farm, and I sold Christmas cards door to door, and so I signed up for book clubs. I started reading about other cultures, other countries, other peoples, and I was just curious. I wanted to know, and we got Reader's Digest. That's where I got all the stuff. And Daddy would call me in. He'd get off the mines when Reader's Digest would come. It'd be a big deal for him. He dropped out of school, and he was in the 9th grade. He used to get into fights. My dad was a 10th degree badass and a 10th degree smartass, and so the first 17 years of my life, I left home when I was 17. The first 17 years of my life made Marine boot camp look like training school for valet parking. And nothing against the Marines, but my dad, one of his brothers was a sniper in Korea. He became a CIA agent, and I was telling JR, that's his name, JR Whitehead, one day after Daddy died. I said, JR, I have the greatest respect for you. You're a badass, and I respect badasses. And he said, your dad was the baddest of all the badasses. He taught all of us other boys. And but Daddy, I asked him, I said, why did you quit school? And he said, well, I was just bored. He said, I'd get into fights and clear out the room just because I knew they'd send me home for a few days. And so I started working. He said, I'd rather be working than go to school. And so when I was teaching college, I always told students the first day, I said, don't ever think. It's going to change your life. You get that college degree, you're going to be proud of that, and more doors will be open to get jobs. But don't ever think you're one bit smarter than anybody else on planet Earth. Because some of the smartest people I've ever known never graduated from high school. And so, but Daddy loved words, and he loved poetry, and he would memorize poems. And he knew Hiawatha, the whole thing, and that's a long poem. And he would recite it to me and recite it to different people. When music was going on, Daddy would recite a poem, and we'd have family gatherings. You pull the rug away, and the musicians would come out and play and perform, and people would dance and tell stories and recite poems. And Daddy loved word power. Reader's Digest had word power. And so he would call out a word to me, and I'd have to spell it and get the definition right. And so I knew that Daddy loved words. And Daddy and I had a tough relationship. He used to beat the hell out of me. And I mean, until I was bloody. And today it would be called abuse. But Daddy was raised that way. And even though, and I was high-strung and independent, and so we'd go, nose to nose. And even when I was a little kid, much to my chagrin, and shows that I'm not all that bright, I would get in Daddy's face when I was 5 years old. And, of course, that just made the beating worse. And but I don't know, I gained a respect at an early age for not only for hard work, for tough and independent people. And my mom was like, and my dad had a gentle side too, but my mom was a gentle and is a gentle soul, and she exemplifies the essence of what it means to be a true Christian. And she was somebody in the area, anywhere, on another farm in our little town, needed food, needed medicine, was sick, hungry. She would pack us kids in the car or the truck, and we would go and visit them and take them groceries. We'd take them. Mama knew the old ways of healing, and but then Daddy had the United Mine Workers insurance, so we had something that a lot of other people didn't have. So we were able to go to the doctor if we needed to. But so I was blessed to be raised to be a warrior, a fierce warrior, by my dad, and a gentleman and a gentle person, a gentle soul by my mom. But they both had those elements, both of them. They're both hard-headed and tough, but good people. And they were the people that neighbors came to if they needed some help or wanted to visit. So our door was always open to, and I liked that. And I live that way myself. So what did you ask me?
I think you answered it.
Okay. My kids, I got 3 grown kids, and I got 6 grandkids and another one on the way. And my kids, once they were grown, they told me, they said, now, whenever we would have a new friend over to visit, we would tell them, whatever you do, don't ask Daddy a question or we won't have time to play. But they didn't tell me that until they were grown. I thought it was funny.
My kids do the same thing to me.
Okay. You understand then.
Oh, yeah.
I have a question for you, darling.
Okay.
You are a very fascinating man. This is the first time I'm ever getting to hear you or know you, so it's a pleasure being on here with you, darling. But let me ask you, you've talked about your influences such as your dad and your mother on your life. Is there any influences that you draw from now that help with your writings and what you write about now?
There have been so many influences, and I have chosen, I was raised to follow a different path, but I always felt the calling to follow my intuition and that still small voice within, and so that's led to me meeting through synchronicity, meeting all kinds of people. I worked for a year to bring the Dalai Lama to Louisville, and I ended up meeting him and I had the opportunity to ask him a question. I asked him to I said, would you please share with me a statement that I could share with young people of all ages. And so he gave me a long message, and it was one of the strangest experiences of my life because it was recorded, and the recording was discovered recently, and I didn't know it had been recorded, and so the words that he said to me were not the words I heard. I heard the exact words through some kind of spiritual transmission. to this poem that I wrote with the Dalai Lama. I put us both down as authors, and it's titled Never Give Up. Never give up, no matter what is going on, never give up. Develop the heart. Too much energy in your country is spent developing the mind instead of the heart. Develop the heart. Be compassionate, not just with your friends, but with everyone. Be compassionate. Work for peace. In your heart and in the world, work for peace. And I say again, never give up. No matter what is going on around you, never give up. Well, that's the poem, and it's now all over the world. And that's when the Dalai Lama, when I asked him the question and he responded with his longish message, that's all I heard. So it was one of the most unusual experiences, and it was a gift. It was a blessing from the spirit realm to me. And so I wrote him, and later on, 3 months later, he was back in Dharamsala, India, and I wrote him, and I told him the whole story and wrote the poem down and asked for his blessing for it, which he gave to me. And so now it's all over the world. But I've also, one other encounter I had. One day, I had a friend, Marjorie Richmond, who I met. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, and I went to the Edgar Cayce Center in Phoenix, and I was interested in earth changes, according to the Edgar Cayce predictions. And I said, I was thinking about moving when the earth changes occur. Prior to the earth changes, I want to be in a safe place when they occur. And so, can you give me contacts? And one of the places I asked for a contact from was Kentucky, because that's where I'm from. And so they gave me the name of Marjorie Richmond. So I contacted her, and over a period of several years, over the phone and through letters, we became good friends. And then eventually I moved back to Kentucky, and we met in person shortly after her husband died. Her husband's an influential person here in Kentucky. And it turns out Marjorie and I studied, we did much spiritual, psychic research and study on with out-of-body experiences. We lived about a half hour apart, but we would, at a certain assigned time of day, we would go into a deep state of meditation, and we would go through an out-of-body experience. I developed the ability to go to her home and visit her, and we would have a conversation, and we would make notes about this and compare them when we met weekly. When we would meet again in person weekly, we would compare our notes, and sure enough, things matched up. We went to a Search for God, Edgar Cayce Search for God group at the Episcopal Church in Orangeboro, Kentucky, with all elderly people in that group, about a dozen of us, and that was a fascinating learning experience for me. So one day Marjorie called and said, you and I have been called to receive a message to meet Anna Mitchell Hedges and to receive a message from the Crystal Skull. Anna Mitchell Hedges had discovered it's the main of the 13 crystal skulls. So her dad was Anna Mitchell Hedges' dad was Great Britain's leading explorer in his lifetime. She was an adopted child. And so we went to this meeting. About 200 people from around the world were there, had been called to the meeting, and we heard the message that was channeled through this lovely young lady who was a psychic from Canada, and she sat next to the crystal skull. And she gave us a message, and she said, in order to consecrate the message that you have received, so you can go forward now and be an emissary and share the message, do the work you've been called to do, which is to let people know that the end times are near, the great transition is at hand, and to know that fear is forever trumped by love. And there is more to the message, but that's the core of the message. And she said, come up now and touch the crystal skull. And so, without thinking, one thing I was taught and learned are good manners. And so I'm always open still I'll open a door for people, and so, but but I was like the first person up to the Crystal Skull of 200 people, and I turned around and Marjorie was right behind me, and Marjorie died when she was 102, just a few years ago. Her birthday was the same as Anna Mitchell Hedges, January the 14th, and Marjorie was 2 years older than her, though, but they're both Capricorns. So we were both up there. We touched the Crystal Skull, consecrated the message, the vows, and so we went. That was a life changer for me. That was 26 years ago. I had been living to be in my dream from that time forward. It's the doors that I had knocked on up until that time in my life. I could knock and doors wouldn't open, beat my head bloody, doors wouldn't open, and all of a sudden after that encounter with the Anna Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull, doors started opening automatically for me. And so many doors that, I would just envision things. And then, I'd get a phone call or a letter, or I would call somebody and they say, absolutely, yes, let's work together. And so that was a life changer. And then I met the Dalai Lama not too long after that. And then I've just one person after another, and one person I meet tells other people about my work and direct people to me, and then I end up working with them. And so it's just uncanny. As Carl Jung, the great psychologist, psychiatrist who Sigmund Freud wanted to follow in his footsteps, Carl Jung, the term he came up with was uncanny. Inner happenings, spiritual experiences that occur on the inside that have an impact on your outer world, on your outer life. They're real. They're as real, if not more real, than just everyday experiences. But my life is filled with them. So there's a couple of experiences for you there to answer your question.
I wish everybody could answer a question great like that.
Well, I've been blessed to have a lot of incredible experiences.
That, sir, you have. And also, you also do a lot of work with musicians, with your poetry. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that? And I guess, how that works and how that inspires you, or, just do your thing. When I was in the 6th grade, I wanted to play the trumpet, but our school, I went through the 9th grade, grades 1 through 9. My school, Centertown School, grades 1 through 12, there were about 300 students in the whole school. And so, but after the 9th grade, when I started my 10th grade, the county consolidated, which is the death of small-town America. The consolidation of schools was the death of small-town America, which is a travesty as far as I'm concerned, because small towns are really the soul, the lifeblood of the United States of America. And that it's just, people say, well, Walmart killed all the mom-and-pop stores, and Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers and wouldn't fire them back and broke the backs of the unions, which ended up was the beginning of the end of the middle class. But then Bill Clinton signed NAFTA, and so that just furthered what Reagan had started with, factories closing and going to Mexico and the Philippines and leaving the U.S. And now Obama has signed this new trade TPP, the new Trans-Pacific, the new trade agreement, which makes that even worse. And so, yes, those are factors in the devastating effects, the death of the United States of America as we knew it, and the death of the middle class. But to me, consolidating our schools and closing all the little schools, the small classrooms, the education system is realizing now that it's the small classrooms and the small schools
that are really the way to go. And so anyway, I went to a small school, and the students who came out of my school, we didn't have computers. That was long before computers came along, and the students just generally went out and did well with their lives, regardless of whether they were school bus drivers, policemen, teachers, doctors. They all went into different professions and fields, but they were all good people, and they did well for themselves, each in their own way, and they found happiness in their own way. And so I miss the small schools. So I went to a small school till the 10th grade, and then with consolidated school, there were 1,200 students in 4 grades in high school, and there were as many schools in my graduating class as there were in the entire grades 1 through 12. So, which reminds me, hey, a few years back, I thought I was a juvenile delinquent in high school. I was inducted into my high school Hall of Fame representing my 1968 graduating class. I was totally shocked when they called me and told me. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, like, are you talking about me? You sure you got the right person here? So anyway, I'm in the 6th grade, and I love music, and so I wanted to play a trumpet. We didn't have a trumpet, but we had one cornet, which is similar to a trumpet, but it has a lower sound. So I took up the cornet, and by the 8th grade, I was a first seat in the band, but then the basketball coach, see, I've been an athlete all my life. I love sports, and basketball is my favorite sport still. I played baseball and basketball. That's the only sports we had, team sports in school. But the basketball coach in 8th grade said, Ronnie, you got to make a decision, basketball or band, which is going to be, you can't do both. So, of course, it was basketball, but the music still, it's with me, it's in me, and I hear it, I feel it, it's part of me. So I always combine a rhythm, a musical element to my poetry, and so when I'm working with different musicians and bands, I'm able to share with them the emotional content of the piece I'm going to present. So I'll let them start off. I'll give a title to a piece, and I'll let them start off with the music, and then I will just feel the groove, the rhythm, and I will join in at the right place. And just listening is the greatest art of all. That's one thing I learned. I learned it as a boy with my dad teaching me how to hunt, sitting in the woods before sunrise and before sunset, say squirrel hunting, just sitting in the woods waiting for a squirrel to come through the trees. And basically, you're just sitting there. I would just sit there and listen to the sounds of the forest, and I love the forest, and listen to the leaves, with the wind dancing with the leaves. And so I learned to listen. I learned to meditate, and meditation is nothing more than being still and listening. And then I started working with David Amram, who is America's, he's a living legend. He's worked with all the greats in all the areas of, he worked with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk, all the jazz greats. And then he worked with you just go down the list of musicians, of actors. He's written scores for films, and so David and I toured in. He's a conductor for orchestras. He has perfect pitch, and so he can hear if one person's hit the wrong note, and so he has more classical compositions than any other living composer, but he's a jazz musician, a classical musician, and so he reminded me that listening is the greatest art of all. And when you're performing, the main instrument is the voice. It's the oldest, most ancient instrument. And so all the musicians that are playing the instruments, if there's a voice in the concert, in the performance, the voice leads. It's out just a little bit ahead of the other instruments. But the voice, whoever the speaker is always listening to the instruments, to the musicians, and vice versa. And so when you listen to each other, it's a conversation that goes on. It's a give and take. And you become an active listener. Even when you're talking, you're listening. Even when you're speaking, like I'm listening to you all listening right now. When you're speaking, I'm listening. So we're always readers. Even when we're listening, when we're seeing, when we're looking at a painting, we're reading, and we're listening to the sounds that come to us from a painting, from a musical score, from a book that we're reading silently. Everything I do involves every aspect of my being. It's one thing that it used to frustrate the hell out of me as a professor. I'd be walking down the halls with these other professors up in where the offices were, and I just wanted to grab them and shake them, and I felt like they were just brains floating down the halls. There weren't any bodies attached to them. I wanted to shake them and remind them, hey, you're a human being. Remember all of who you are. And so one thing that I developed as a teacher was I did a lot of research and study to find out the fastest way to help students grow as writers. And I did a lot of research asking people, what's your favorite poem? What's your favorite song? What's your favorite story, book, movie? And inevitably it turned out that we love the stories, the poems, the songs, the movies that combine all the elements, the emotional elements. We're no stronger than our weakest emotion. We are emotional beings more than anything else. So it's the stories that combine all of what it means to be a human being that are the most popular, that we like the most. And so I realized that the fastest way to develop a student's writing was to have them go back to their earliest memories and start writing them down, and to write the stories, the terrible happenings and the beautiful happenings, the agony and the ecstasy from their earliest memories, from childhood on up, to write their own life story. What's more important to us than our own life story, than our own lives? And so when I taught writing, I taught literature, I taught writing, the arts, and I would have people write their autobiographies, the story of their own lives. And it's a process of self-discovery. When I left home when I was 17, I just wanted to get the hell away from Kentucky and never come back. I was filled with so much pain and suffering, the way I was raised. There was a lot of brutality in it, and it wasn't until I moved to Arizona, and I started remembering through dreams, through meditation, just being still and just letting my life come to me and reflecting on my childhood. And I remembered that it wasn't all bad, that I had wonderful memories with relatives, with friends, with nature. It wasn't just, one beating after another. And so that's when I began to find my voice, not only as a writer but as a person, was through the remembering of my childhood. Okay, so anyway, I think I answered your question there about music and poetry. I love music. Music is a gift. Music is the language of angels, and it's a gift to us humans, and it is a universal language. And real poetry is music, and real music is poetry. And the more the musicians I've worked with, famous, infamous, wonderful musicians, known and unknown, young, all ages. But musicians want to be poets, and poets want to be musicians. And I've always just told them, I said, poets are musicians, and musicians are poets, and open yourself up and combine both into what you do. So Amiri Baraka is one of the greatest black poets. He's passed away a few years ago. I did a lot of work with him. He used to be Leroy Jones. He changed his name to Amiri Baraka. He's from Newark, New Jersey, and he's a playwright and a poet. He was a radical. He's a good guy, but he was a radical, and but he always wanted to be he was Malcolm X's right-hand man. He told me a lot of stories about Malcolm X, but he said he was a brilliant poet. He was a shaman of a poet. He was a jazz musician poet. He said, I always wanted to be a jazz musician. He said, and I finally realized that I wasn't a very good musician, but I was a poet, and I turned all my attention to poetry. And what he ended up being, when he performed his poetry on stage, sometimes when I wasn't paying total attention, I thought I was hearing a jazz band. And then I'd come to and realize it was just him sharing his poetry. So anyway, that's how I feel about poetry and music. Thanks for asking.
Well, that's amazing.
That is. I mean, I'm blown away by the fact that you were with a gentleman that was the right-hand man of Malcolm X. I mean, you have so many great tales to tell, Ron. One of my questions for you, darling, is I understand that you were nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature by New York City professor James Joyce. Can you explain the process in becoming a nominee, and what was it like, and how did it feel, and all? To be nominated for such an honor like that, my friend.
Well, things like that just catch me completely off guard. It is a great honor, and the one thing that I've discovered, once you're nominated for the Nobel, your name stays in their pool of nominees. You have to be alive, but once you've been nominated, your name stays in there. But it's a great honor, and one thing that I don't know, I'm one of those people who I devote my entire life to. When it comes to work, my work is for 26 years, it's been my passion. I built a bridge by taking one step at a time from where I was doing jobs I didn't want to do to where I wanted to be. And it took me 8 years to get there, building that bridge, before I was living and being my dream. And so for 26 years, I'm a workaholic, but it's not work when you're living and being your dream. It's passion. And so I work around the clock doing creative work, and which is writing, and I'm always, I get done with one project, I move on to the next project, and I try to keep about 25 collaborative projects going with people around the world, because I like to collaborate with people. I like people from all walks of life, and I'm always looking for the common ground. One thing I've discovered is that no matter who the person is or what they do, we got something in common. I know we do, and so I'm always looking for that. And then I just like to, let's talk about that. So let's get to know each other. Let's become friends. I'm always, one thing that's missing in our society today, unfortunately, is discourse. It's discourse. It's conversation. It's agreeing to disagree. And I was raised by Well, let's see, politically conservative people. And people ask me, I was on a radio interview with my mom about the new book recently, and the radio host, nice guy, my intuition told me, okay, he's going to want to talk about politics. And so he, sure enough, he said, well, he brought it up and he said, well, I can tell from some of your responses that you're one of these, let's see, one of these people who believe in welfare state. And I said, well, I was hoping you wouldn't bring up politics, but since you have, I'll tell you what I am. I'm an Abraham Lincoln Republican. In 1863, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation freeing the slaves. I'm a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Democrat. In 1935, he signed the Social Security Act, giving the working class the only retirement most of us will ever have. But I'm a Benjamin Franklin independent, that eccentric genius who more than anybody birthed those precious documents on which our country still barely stands. But then I have to add, I think more than anything, I'm still the Kentucky farm boy anarchist who believes that the only government for me is the government of individual responsibility and helping my neighbors. So that shut him up. So he said, well, there wasn't anything really to argue about. And I said, the first sign when determining whether a country and its people are civilized is to pay attention to how they take care of those who can't take care of themselves, the elderly, children, and the sick. And it's just a good neighbor to help. You got elderly people who can't help themselves, to help them out. If there are sick kids who need help, you help them out. And so that's the way I look at politics. I'm an independent, and I just want whoever. I can't stand politics. I just want somebody, and it's impossible. I hope that whoever is elected will take care of us, and it's a complex issue, and we live in a complex world, and it's important just to remind people, and at least like Walt Whitman, the poet during the Civil War, who wrote Leaves of Grass and who wrote a biography of Abraham Lincoln, who is also a Kentuckian and who was psychic too. I've read everything I can get my hands on about Abraham Lincoln, the Kentucky farm boy, who had visions and was psychic as a little boy, and throughout his life was intuitive. And but Walt Whitman, even though he didn't believe in war, he visited the infirmaries where the main medical cure was saw, and doctors sawing legs and arms off so the soldiers wouldn't get gangrene and die, because we didn't have penicillin. And he would read to the soldiers and do what he could to help them and dress their wounds and carry letters for them and messages. And so I don't know. Sometimes I think that's the best thing a person can do in this world. Even though I consider myself to be a spiritual warrior, I just want to do what's right for people, and I want everybody to get along. I just wish the hell we could. And I know, but if we hadn't fought Hitler, we'd probably be living in the Nazi world. So I'm not naive either. Sometimes you got to get out there and fight. So it's a difficult situation. We just have to do what we feel like is right when we have to do something.
You're right. Well, I tell you what, Ron, that hour went by real quick. And I can't believe how fast that went. And like I keep telling my manager, they're going to have to give me a 2-hour show.
Has it been an hour already?
Yeah,
I swear.
We got about.
Hey, well, I'm sorry I took so much time, but listen, thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on. And if there's any contact information you want to give out real quick, or how people can get a hold of you.
Google Ron Whitehead, and my official website is tappingmyownphone.com. While I wait for them to tap it, they probably are already, so go ahead and tap your own phone. I wrote a poem titled Tapping My Own Phone based on an actual experience I had. I published a couple of poems by President Jimmy Carter, and I sent the package. I didn't know I didn't know that ex-presidents had a secret address, and I was given the secret address, and I sent his posters, which I made of his poem, to the secret address, and I got a call from the Secret Service right when I was getting ready to walk out the door to go teach, and I had to spend a day on the phone with them, and there were helicopters flying over my house, and it's like, so I ended up writing Tapping My Own Phone. So you want to read the poem, check it out. You can Google it. Ron Whitehead, Tapping My Own Phone. Hey, thank you all. Good to visit with you.
Oh, thank you. You have an open invitation anytime, my friend.
Okay. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, you too. Thanks. Well, that's it for us tonight. I want to thank Ron so much for coming on the show. We'll welcome him back, like I said, any day. And that's it for us tonight. I want to thank Ron again for coming on the show, and thank everyone that took the time to listen and take part of the show. I want to thank my special co-host, Misty Connor, for coming on and helping me out. And I'd like to give a big shout-out to Vibe Network, also to all the first responders, our men and women in armed services. Thank you all for your service. Our guest for next Thursday night, March 31st, will be Dr. Delilah O'Haines. We'll turn in next week to another exciting show starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, be safe and have a good night.